Dan Miller, Fox 2, where you at, brother?
Hey, Dan.
Hey, guys, what's up?
Thanks for slipping in.
I'm in Allen Park. You guys just talking about Jake Bates. I just got done with him. So hit me with the Jake Bates questions. What a good kid, man. I mean, just so easy to root for, and what an incredible story.
What kind of contract does a kicker get after this kind of season, Dan? I know it's not over, but moving forward.
It'll be a decent contract. Yeah. I don't think he'll he won't get the contract that the best guys in the league get, but because he's still under control and he doesn't have as much, leverage as some other guys might. But he'll get a nice contract. Now, I honestly don't know what he signed the first time. If they signed him to a 2-year deal, just a 1-year deal, or what that was. But whatever it was, they obviously had to outbid a couple of the teams, as you guys alluded to. So it's easy enough to look up, but I'm just not 100% sure what he signed the first time.
I think it was 1 year, $100,000, something like that.
Hey, Dan, here's a 2-for-1. What has the kicking of Jake Bates meant to Dan Campbell, Ben Johnson, the Detroit Lions? Because one of the reasons why it became such a good team going forward on fourth down is because they didn't have a kicker. They now have a kicker. What element does that add to Ben Johnson and Dan Campbell's decision making?
That's a good question, Braylon. I'll be honest with you. I don't think a lot.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I still think Dan Campbell believes in his offense, and if he can put his offense out there to make a play, he's going to do that. I just think he's got a certain way that he views field goals, and maybe there's a look. I think we've seen, against Minnesota, they weren't, some of us thought, man, why aren't they trying to get closer? And then even in that game the other night, I thought before the 52-yarder, why aren't they trying to get closer? So maybe that impacts it. He knows this kid's got tremendous range. But I just don't know if it impacts his decisions on fourth downs any more than it did back when he had Badgley or one of those other guys that have been through here. Because I think the bottom line is this. I think he trusts his offense as his best unit. And I think if he's got a chance to empower them and enable them, he does that. And, we've seen him do that pretty consistently since he's been here. But I think it also, gives him confidence clearly that he's got a guy back there that can, nail field goals from range and has been, really good at some critical times against the Rams, against Minnesota, and then this past game as well.
Hey, Dan, real quickly, last thing from me. Last week we talked about the defense in the second half, Aaron Glenn, and how good he's been. Well, I don't want to be the dead drum, but here we go again. Second half, no point scored. The defense just seems to find a way, when the game is the biggest, to play their best brand of football.
Yeah, and I would even throw in, Braylon, I thought that holding them to field goals on those three drives in the first half was huge. Because if they're scoring 7, this game's over. They're not coming back.
You're not lying.
Yeah. They had a short field where they scored 1 touchdown. I know they'd like to have that last drive of the half back where they gave up a big play and all of a sudden they're in trouble down there. And they scored 7 on that one. But I really believe that holding them to 3 points 3 times in that first half and having it be 23-7 instead of, 30-7 or 33-7 or whatever it could have been if you get another touchdown or 2 was significant. But there's no doubt that they put the clamps on in the second half. And I thought Stroud helped him a little bit. That wasn't a good throw to the end zone. He puts a little bit more on that. Look, Braylon, you're a receiver.
You need some of that. You need some of that, Dan. You need a little bit of that help sometimes.
Hey, look, you need a little help. Look, and the Lions helped them at times too in the game. Yeah. So things happen. But those guys did a terrific job. And one thing that you have to point out, 26 carries for whatever it was, 48 yards or whatever that they were able to hold him to. That's the difference in the game, because part of it, significant part of it. If Houston can salt that thing away on the ground and start stacking first downs and burning clocks, it's a different game. Yep. But the Lions did such a good job on their running game, and on a terrific running back, that if that doesn't happen, maybe this thing goes a different way. So I thought consistently throughout the game, stopping their running game was a huge part of this story as well, because it never let them get comfortable on offense.
Joe Mixon was pissed,
look,
Dan.
Yeah.
He was pissed. He threw he threw the Surface Pro and everything. They had him bottled up. Nope, they had him bottled up.
Nowhere to go, and he's a terrific player. He was coming off, I think, a 124-yard game, and he was averaging 4.8 yards per carry. And look, if they can effectively run the ball in that second half, this is probably a different game because they're burning clock. But instead, they found themselves in second down and long and different situations that put them in a tough spot, where if you're peeling off 6 or 7 yards on first down, it's a different game. But they just were never able to do that.
Every Wednesday, Dan Miller's Weekly Drive, brought to you by Les Stanford. I got to say, flying home on the wings of Jake Bates was one of my favorite calls ever.
Good call.
Good job,
We've
man.
talked a lot about the kicking game today, but I want to kind of go on to J-Mo, because in our first 3 possessions, this team looked lost. There were the SOL fans creeping up in our chat, but there was a play made by J-Mo where he got hit on that 3rd and 16, right in the hands, looked like he was going to drop it, brought it back in and gets crunched. Later on in the second half, another big-time 3rd down where he just gets absolutely sandwiched. Weren't we questioning this kid's hands just last year, Dan?
Well, I think there have been times where certainly J-Mo's had some issues with drop balls, but, I mean, the entire team coming into last week, I think, only had one all year. So the entire team has done a better job on that. But, yeah, he made a couple of clutch catches. One, he had to go behind him. The other one that, hit his hands, popped up in the air. Credit to him, he caught it. And then the other one you're talking about, he got absolutely drilled.
Yeah, he did.
And hung on to that football. So
I retired.
Look, his hands are better this year than they have been in the past. He made some critical catches. There was also one where he had to go behind him where he made the catch, which was a really nice catch. So, it was, Dan Campbell just got done saying it. It's a fact. It was good to have him back, man. It's just such an added weapon when he's in there, knowing that defenses have to respect him and his ability, whether he's just catching it, receiver screen or a crossing route or going on a fly route, whatever it is, you have to respect where he is, and that just makes life easier for everybody else.
I'll tell you, Dan, watching Jared Goff in that game, and I know he had 5 picks. One's a Hail Mary. 2 were tipped. Maybe 2 were his fault out of all of those, to be honest with you. He was harassed. That long ball in the first quarter to J-Mo, when he just underthrew him by a hair. He had a guy basically almost tipped that ball. I really felt still confident that he could bring them back. And he don't care. It looks like he just doesn't care. And Dan Campbell's like, I'm not going to change him. Just let him go out there and sling it. You got an all-star team out there. They don't know what the hell's coming at them.
Yeah, I think it's pretty easy to say you're not going to change him when the guy literally just had 5 games that were better than anybody in the history of the National Football League in certain regards, with completions and quarterback ratings and touchdowns compared to completions. I don't want to say they were due, but you're going to have a game like that. And maybe it's not 5 picks, but as you said, look, a couple of them were tipped. There were some questions about routes on a couple of those as well. Whatever the case, the defense kept them in it. And they didn't allow all of those to turn into, I think they had 10 points off the turnovers. I believe that's it. But, and Jared's the kind of guy that he's not going to go into a shell. That's not going to impact him. He's going to go out and try to win the game, and they did that. So I don't look at that as anything other than it was a rough day at the office for the offense. I know the offensive line would tell you they need to be better. Jared took some hits they don't want to see him take. And it just added up to, a game where they had some things break against them, but they didn't break. And that's the most important thing. And I anticipate that Jared Goff will come right back out and play good football and be ready to go this week.
Listen, this is a guy that was drafted.
He played good football when they needed him. That third,
they won the game.
Sixth connection between him and Amon-Ra from the 48-yard line. If you don't complete that, you're facing a massive decision with around 2 minutes to go. Yeah. A 66-yard field goal, sure, he's got the distance, but if you miss it, they're in field goal range. If you punt it, you put the ball back in their hands. That 3rd and 6, Goff to Amon-Ra was everything we know this Lions team is. It takes you back to the game clincher against the Rams. It's the protection. It's the quarterback. It's 14 getting open. at critical times, and they did it. And that was a huge play.
It is, Dan. And, this guy was drafted number 1 for a reason. But it looks like he got torn down a little towards the end of his stay in L.A. And to come here, let's face it, he got traded here to hang on a vine. Lions were the worst team in the league, or one of them, and they have built him back up. Who do you give the most credit to here in building Jared Goff back up to that number 1 draft choice?
Well, I think there's a number of guys. I think I would start with Brad Holmes and Ray Agnew, the GM and his assistant GM, because they were the guys that had him in Los Angeles, and I think they were the guys that believed from day one that you can rebuild this guy. They saw what he was. They saw what had happened to him, and I think they believed that in the right circumstances, this guy's still an elite quarterback in this league. And so I credit them. I'm sure they convinced Dan Campbell of the same thing. And while we all may have thought he was only going to be here for a short period of time or until, they were in position to draft another quarterback, I really think they believed that if they surrounded him with the right players, that they were going to have a quarterback. And that was always the best case scenario. If you didn't have to utilize any of those high draft picks on a quarterback, and Jared Goff could become your guy, and that's what happened. And then look, let's credit Ben Johnson as well. The relationship that those two have and the way that they've worked this offense out to something that Goff is incredibly comfortable in. I just think it's an organizational credit that should go around. And there's certain people that should be named, but man, it's when you build an offensive line like that and you draft weapons like that, and Goff plays with the efficiency and high level that he's playing. I mean, who deserves the most credit? Jared Goff, because Jared Goff is playing his tail off, and these guys believe in him, and that belief has paid huge dividends.
Hey, Dan, pleasure to talk to you again. And I just wanted to talk to you about AG, man. Aaron Glenn, that was one of the best coach games I think we have ever seen him as Lions defensive coordinator, completely shutting out the Houston Texans in the second half after, everything that transpired in the first half. Can you just speak to, the improvement that AG has made this year? Because we all knew that, maybe he was good, but we just needed to see him with more talent. But, he has surpassed like a lot of my expectations this year, and I'm sure a lot of other fans as well. Can you just speak to what you're seeing from Aaron Glenn right now as Lions defensive coordinator?
I think it's been tough to evaluate Aaron Glenn over the years. Look, the numbers, if you look at his defense, they were elite against the run last year, not against the pass. And in years before that, the numbers weren't great. But got to have talent. You just said it. You've got to have the talent in this league to play the style that he wants to play like any defensive coordinator wants to play. Look, he finished last year with guys that should not be starting quarterbacks in this league that were forced in there by injury and just put them in a tough position. And then, previous to that, they didn't have much of a pass rush till Aiden came along. He has had defensive deficiencies. They built this offense before they built this defense. And, I think, as you have seen the defensive talent grow, you've seen the job that Aaron Glenn can do. And I think Aaron Glenn's a heck of a defensive coordinator who knows how to work with what he's got, and he hasn't had much at times. But I think now you're starting. Look, if Zadarius Smith can provide a consistent rush, if Josh Paschal is the guy that we saw the other night, and he can be that way consistently. Aleem is playing at a Pro Bowl, maybe an all-pro level right now. He's been terrific. And DJ Reader we know what he is. He's one of the better interior defensive linemen in the league. And throw in other guys, whoever. Nowaski's playing really well for them and giving them some stuff off the edge and a little bit of ability off the edge. I just think if I had to sum up AG's time here, I think he's a really, really good coach, talented leader. But he hasn't had a lot to work with at times. And as he's gotten more to work with, we've seen the results. And I think go back to last year when, as I said, they were elite against the run, struggled against the pass, but what they envisioned, CJ wasn't in there, Mosley wasn't in there. Yep. The guys that they thought would be the core of that secondary weren't playing.
You mentioned Zadarius Smith, and I want to get back to him. One of the things that I noticed watching the game was just him on the sideline coaching the defensive line, coaching some of the defensive players. Like, just talk about what does that mean when you see it. You know, you're talking about a guy that's coming in from another team and he's immediately acclimated himself, and he didn't even have a helmet on. That was really good to see if you're a Lions fan.
Yeah, I think so, and I think he wanted to be here. And Braylon, I think that means everything. And look, obviously it was a tough time in Cleveland. They weren't going anywhere there. He's coming back into a division he knows well. You're going to play for the top team in the NFC right now. You're going to play for a team that a lot of people think is the favorite in the conference and a Super Bowl team. Long way to go, but we all make judgments through 9 weeks, 10 weeks, and we'll make more judgments in the 11th. So, look, it's a wonderful move for him to be able to make. And you're coming to a staff that I think people around the league know players want to play for. So it's all positive. I think he jumped in there and was helping guys. He's got experience that some of these other guys don't have. And I think it's all positive. And just to see his smile after the game and know how excited he was to be in Detroit, it just bodes well. Now let's see him get a helmet on and go out there and play. And I'm excited about it. And I think he can be an impactful player and the kind of player that can make everybody around him better, because you have to respect him. You know, even at 32, if he's not the same guy he was at 26, and who is. But you know what? I think if you sell him short, he's going to make you hurt. And I think he's the kind of guy that can come in here and change this defense and make life easier for Aleem and DJ and Pascal and whoever else they put out there. It gives offenses something else to think about. But overriding is your point. Just you love the attitude, the smile, the desire to be here, and knowing that he's got a chance to be a part of something special.
Dan, what'd you think of the guys that made a comeback a little bit this week? I'm talking about James Houston and that cast of characters. I mean,
Pascal.
He played his best game in 2 years, right?
Coach just talked about him and said, look different, and it did. And look, that's what James has to do. James has to find that every week. That has to be his baseline. And now he's going to have more talent around him with Za'Darius, with those guys in the middle, with Pascal, with Nowoski, with whomever they want to throw out there on the edge, whether it's Beauplan or one of these other guys that they're using. We know there's talent there. I think the question is the depth of that talent and how much can you trust him. I thought a nice play the other night was when he was not on the line. He had dropped, and then he came up and made a play. We hadn't seen a ton of that from James, and I don't know that the coaching staff had a ton of trust in him to do that, but there he was doing it. But he was a factor, and he's got that ability to be a factor. And if he can not make it a comeback, but make it his weekly performance, man, that changes this team. The more guys that you have up front that are impacting a quarterback, that secondary is so good, fellas, that if you give them a chance to make a play on the ball, and that's what you do when you have a pass rush, this defense gets exponentially better if they can do that. So it was great to see. I love hearing Lomas and TJ call his name out, because that means he's making plays and he's impactful back there. And again, Campbell just talked about it. He saw it, and that's big for your head coach to start talking about you in a situation like that.
Yeah, Dan, and can you share any information that you have on the statuses of Taylor Decker and Sam Laporta? They're going against the Jags this week, so this may be a week in which you don't really need them like that, and they could sit. But any information you have on those two guys and their statuses for Sunday?
Yeah, and I don't want to be cliche, but don't sleep on the Jags, because you know what? In this league, people get beat. It just happens, and I've had people say that. I mean, just things happen in this league. You got to go out and play, and you got to go out and win. If you go out there and have turnovers and make them think this is their week, then it can happen. And they've got some good players in there, and Walker and Allen are two guys that can ruin your day if you let them. So you got to be ready for it. I did not hear, because I was actually out talking to Bates, I did not hear if Coach updated those two guys. What he said on Monday was they were both kind of questionable, both kind of day-to-day, but neither one of them was dealing with something long-term. So I certainly didn't get an overwhelming confidence that they were going to play. The Lions will put something out at 4 o'clock today, which will be – they didn't really have a full practice day. They just had a walkthrough, but they have to put something out in terms of injuries. So we'll see how those guys are listed. But based on what Coach said and just reading the tea leaves, nothing else, kind of iffy, I feel, on both of them as to whether or not they're going to be ready to go this week.
Playing against Mac Jones, though.
We are so blessed to have.
I mean, look, we'll see. I mean, I don't sell anybody short in this league. Look, there were a lot of teams that, when the Lions weren't good, that thought it was going to be a walkover, and every once in a while we surprise somebody. So just you can't go out there and play, half a football game. You can't go out there and play sloppy. You got to play clean. Just go out there. Don't get you know what? You give a bad team a reason to think this is their day, and all of a sudden things change. Those guys start flying around the field. Make them think it's not their day by the second quarter, and you might see a different game. That's, I think, the intention of the Lions.
I was saying we are so blessed to have Dapper Dan here each and every Wednesday for Dan Miller's Weekly Drive, brought to you by Les Stanford. But we are also blessed here in Detroit. I think we're the greatest fan base in the world. We've had Ernie Harwell, Mark Champion, George Blaha, Mickey Redmond, and now Jason Benetti. But we've been listening to you for over 20 years. We are so blessed to have you here as well. Can you just real quick before we let you go speak to how amazing it is in Detroit to have had this long list of Hall of Fame announcers?
Incredible. And throw the two Kens in there too,
and Dan Dickerson.
Our hockey guys are unparalleled. Dan Dickerson, who is, calling magical moments for that baseball team. And I think we talked about this before. I got such respect for baseball guys because I just think to be able to sit there and do what Dan does and carry that for 3 hours or 2:45 a night and make it seem seamless is incredible. And, but look, we are blessed here. We have had a history of great announcers, and I'm not putting myself in that group. I'll talk about what I see as a fan watching these. Well, I appreciate that, but I'm a fan too, and I sit there and I watch these other guys and what they do and how they do it. And look, George has been doing this since the 70s, which is incredible, and called championships and great moments and been through that. And that's the kind of history we all want. That's the kind of, resume we all want is what George has done. And George is moving towards 50 years now, which is just incredible. And to watch, and I've been able to do it, Ken Cal and Ken Daniels' work and the way they do their craft, and it's incredible. And you guys said it, Mark is amazing, and doing 82 games a year, that's a different world too. So, all of them, it's incredible. And I don't want to leave anybody out because I think they're all outstanding. And we've really, in a great sports town, I think you better be ready when you get behind that mic, because I don't think people in Detroit would accept anything less. And I've always taken that as my motivation as, I know what kind of town I'm in here. I know what kind of fans these are, and it's up to me to live up to their standards. And I think that's what you have to do. And we certainly have people that have done that and continue to do that with all of our teams here, which are just incredible announcers.